Hello, welcome back. It's your host here, Toni Collis, for Leading Women in Tech. We're talking all things leadership, success, and being a woman in the world of tech. And today I want to talk about the quantity or quality of your work in particular, redefining what success actually means. I want us to focus on quantity over quality, but this goes against everything you are indoctrinated in. So why is it that I want to talk about quantity and quality? What do I mean of quantity versus quality? And why is this something that we all struggle with? Most of us sit in reactive mode all day, every day. We sit responding to emails. We need to be available to answer queries immediately in the Slacks or Teams queries. And there is this need to be always on, always available. And the problem with that is it means we get ping, 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 ping all day. We're always being notified. We go into a meeting, we get 5 new action items, and we go and immediately try and triage those. Our boss asks us something, we pass it down immediately to our teams. We sit in reactive mode. The majority of the work we do is responsive to the environment around us, instead of being strategic. You probably have a strategy. You might have quarterly goals. You might have a corporate strategy you're working towards. You might have OKRs, or as I like to follow the 4 disciplines of execution, wildly important goals, whatever you want to call them. You probably have a strategic direction you're supposed to be working towards. How many times have you got to the end of a reporting cycle, whether that's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a quarter, or longer, and thought, I haven't done any work? The number of women that come and work with me who say, it's the end of the quarter, I can't do any coaching this week or next week because it's the end of the quarter. And I'm thinking to myself, that is exactly why you need coaching. That is what we need to stop. This flurry of panic activity because you spent most of your reporting period in reactive mode and not moving the levers on that longer term strategic stuff. And it's because we get rewarded for it. Our boss says, thank you for responding to that message. Or worse, our boss, and we tend to do this to our team as well, we have this perception if I don't do that, I'm in trouble. And maybe your boss is saying that to you. Why didn't you respond so quickly to my query? I need that turned around by tomorrow. Can you do that? But it isn't actually aligned with the strategic operations. So that's what I really, really want to dig into today. And I know firsthand how important this is. When I first started out, I gradually ramped up how many hours I did as I took on more responsibilities, something many of you have probably experienced. I started working 70 plus hours a week and sometimes more. And there would then be weeks when I was burnt out and I would do nothing at all. I would tell myself I'm at my desk, but actually I'd be doing very, very little. And here's the thing, when I actually started looking at being more proactive instead of just reactive, I could take my hours down to 30 a week from 70 or 80 plus, but doubled my output. I am not kidding. I doubled my output when I did this because it's about doing the right work in the right way. I actually did this because my business coach, when I started my business, had said to me, I don't work with women who work like crazy. And I said to her, well, I'm prepared to put in the work as I kick this off because I hired her the day I started my business. And I said, I really want to get this business off the ground. And she said, did that serve you in corporate? And I said, well, I was always busy. And she said, did it serve you? And I said, no. She said, the problem is if you start your business, putting in those extra hours, you will do that for the rest of the time you operate your business. So she set a red line for me. The best gift that lady ever gave me. I still work with her today. Because I wish I'd done that back in my corporate days. And it's what I now do with my clients, and it absolutely works. It's about realizing the majority of what we do day to day feels important, but actually doesn't matter that much. And as bosses, we are very guilty of passing this on. You'll be getting this down from your boss, and you might feel that there's nothing you can do about it. I'm hoping that today I'm going to give you some tools to do something about all that reactive work. But more important than that, it's what you pass down to your team as well. I don't want you feeling that you have to work crazy hours ever again. I want you to have boundaries. And I don't want you ever falling for the mistake that you have to work crazy hours in order to get a promotion. It is just simply not true. So here's what's coming up in today's episode. We're going to be talking about what traditional success has looked like, why we look for these traditional success metrics, hours worked, tasks completed. We're going to look at the pitfalls of quantity over quality. And I'm going to talk about your mindset and how we can change that in order to change things for you and your team. And ultimately, redefining success as quality and impact instead of quantity. Okay, let's dive in. So far in your career, if you work in the Western world, it is very likely that your success has sort of been measured by how long you work. This is why I think a lot of companies have struggled with working remotely or hybrid working, because presenteeism has been rewarded beyond everything else when it really shouldn't. It should be about impact and what you do. And this is what we care about when we hire. When I'm training people for job interviews, we're always talking about impact statements, the impact you had. We're not talking, I worked at 80, 90-hour week. Most good employers know that's a red flag, because if that's the only way you can create impact, it's not sustainable. So what we do in our day job and get rewarded for is presenteeism. But ultimately, we know that isn't the thing we should be measuring. We need to be looking at strategic objectives instead of an instantaneous, this feels cool, I'm going to go and do it, right? Instead of being reactive to everything that's coming your way, instead of proactive against those longer term strategic objectives that actually make an impact. We often get pushed into doing the work handed out in meetings and by emails and messages, and the strategic priorities get pushed away. Those quarterly reviews get knocked by the wayside until the panic monster kicks in at the end of the reporting cycle. The classic here is engineering. Obviously, that's my background. But an engineer who isn't working in sprint cycles will often be in this situation of there's a longer term goal, but they're just responsive to queries coming in from product, from other team members about broken issues, and they never actually move the architecture forward. Now, the flip side is when engineers are in a sprint cycle following a product roadmap, they shouldn't be in this situation of always pivoting and being reactive. But the product team or whoever's managing the product roadmap can fall into that trap on their behalf. So as leaders, our job, if you're in charge of engineering, is to ensure your product roadmap, marketing objectives, and even the direction of a sales initiative is focused on the strategic objectives of the company rather than this pivoting based on whatever's coming in. Realize that there's a direction of travel and quality is more important than quantity. And make sure everybody in the organization knows that. It's really important to understand that in tech, there is a lot of pressure to do more and be constantly productive. But I think we have a bad understanding of what productive really looks like and should be. There are study after study after study of the pitfalls around this mode of constant productivity and presenteeism. It shouldn't come as a surprise that 83% of North Americans are currently at risk of burnout, according to a global talent trends report published by Mercer. So this is a really, really big deal. At any point, according to a study last year by Biosource, 41% of us are currently experiencing burnout. Those numbers are horrendous and horrific. And a large part of it is quality over quantity, presenteeism, which means we don't feel able to step back. Quality over quantity is what keeps us checking our emails late at night, being available to take telephone calls, whatever time of day or the week it is, feeling that we can't be away for more than a few days at a time for vacation. And when we are on vacation, we're still available for important meetings. It's that quality piece that shifts that perspective. When we focus on quantity, we focus on presenteeism. We focus on how much we do, whether it makes a difference or not. We spend time actually reverse engineering how what we did makes a difference to the business because we need to justify our existence. And in the essence of a time of layoffs, we're going, oh my gosh, what have I actually done? And you start creating impact, which adds to the burnout, adds to the quantity of work you're doing. You're adding additional work to yourself because you're trying to fit this quantity of work that has landed on your desk and fitting it into a box of impact, which it was never meant to fit into. That's additional work, just morphing it into that, right? We spend more time on emails being responsive than shifting the needle. By the way, every email you send generates more. I always say to people, the best thing to do with your emails is to back off them and be less responsive because you're going to get less ping pong. We receive this from our superiors and we tend to pass this culture on down. We get a request. What do? We ask our team to fulfill it. It encourages this you must be responsive attitude instead of we want quality focus. And yes, they are mutually exclusive. You can't have quality if you're trying to be responsive all the time. This was actually the foundation of the book by Cal Newport in his book called Deep Work. Please go and read that if you haven't already. It's a great book. I read it once a year just to refresh myself on what I should be doing. But in his book, Cal Newport talks about the idea of deep work and how to produce really innovative ideas and powerful work that makes a difference. It means uninterrupted brain space and something that most of us in the modern world never have. Most people never get into deep work mode. I'm not kidding. But it's actually what tech companies really need. And so if you are one of the few people that does this, and even better, if you can get your team to do this, you are going to be the most powerful team in the organization you're in. When we're in this space of always available and in and out of meetings, we will never get into deep work where you're going to achieve that stuff that fundamentally shifts the organization forward. And by the way, this is pervasive. We get an expectation and urgency passed down to us. And so we tend to pass it on unless we consciously choose to be the one that breaks the cycle, that doesn't pass it on. The urgency culture is pervasive and very hard to actively move against. You feel that you need an immediate answer so that you expect that from your team as well. But you're just adding this up and making sure that everybody's responding this way. If you take it and pass it on, everybody's been indoctrinated in this same mindset. This is exactly what I had to deal with a recent client of mine. She was a talented engineering manager in a mid-sized company. She's now a VP of engineering. She was known for being highly dedicated, working really, really hard, but she was always busy. She responded to every request from her boss and her team. But despite her busyness, her boss was unhappy with her, which is why she came and worked with me and my team of coaches. Whenever she said something, her boss was like, well, that's great, but I want to see impact in the organization. So the performance was lacking in some way, but he couldn't pinpoint it. This lady's boss could not pinpoint what was going on. So she was really frustrated. She was busy, constantly juggling all these requests and tasks, putting out fires, but her boss was unhappy and making it very, very clear. And so, of course, my client was burnt out. So when we dug into this, what did we find? Well, her workday was consumed by emails, urgent requests, last-minute changes. She prided herself on her ability to handle everything thrown at her. It was her gold star. And that was how she experienced satisfaction. She was doing everything that was thrown at her, but she was exhausted, unfulfilled, working crazy hours. And more important than that, a boss was never happy with her, even though she was doing all of this work. And she was really unfocused and unclear as to why this wasn't aligning with what her boss wanted to see. Here's the thing we found. Most of what she did not align with the company's strategic goals, but her boss couldn't even articulate this. Key projects were actually stalling because of all the reactive work that was going on, which was legit. It was being landed on her. And so she passed it out. But the initiatives that were actually going to keep the company aligned with the future direction of this particular industry she was in were just falling by the wayside. And of course, her team mirrored this approach. They all focused on the immediate tasks and they lost sight of those long-term objectives. It was actually even changing their sprint cycles, right? So this is the danger when even like the strategic planning gets pivoted away from the long-term objectives. So what did we do? Obviously, she came and worked with me. She was so burnt out and frustrated and actually worried about being laid off in the current climate that she brought me and my team in to shift this. The first thing we did was identify a lack of prioritization, this inability to push back on non-essential tasks, and a failure to celebrate progress on the important but slower moving projects. So we started working on prioritization. having a regular one-to-one meetings with her boss to discuss and prioritize tasks, learning how to push back on everything coming her way, and asking for clarity on what was truly important. This actually gave her boss a really good insight into what he should be passing down rather than these just brainstorming ideas that he was like, oh, I think this would be fun to do, not realizing it was 2 weeks worth of effort. He thought it was maybe an hour-long discussion. This allowed her to immediately better align her team with her company's strategic goals. Over about a month, my client held a series of team meetings with her boss and then her team to recalibrate. So she encouraged her team to push back on swift tasks, taught them how to assess tasks based on strategic importance. She was coaching them through this. She actually ended up doing our coach training ultimately, collectively identifying the key projects that are going to deliver most value for the company. And I think one of the things that always strikes me as undervalued in an organization was the celebrations. And this is where she really excelled. She took this to heart because I always start every coaching conversation with, what are we celebrating today? And so she started doing this with her team. Every one-on-one and every team meeting, she would celebrate the small wins and progress on tricky long-term projects. She took the time to recognize and reward her team's efforts, tackling the challenges. And of course, morale went up. Everyone stayed motivated and they actually started working less. So they were more focused and making fewer mistakes. They actually found that they needed less QA, less quality control going on. And one of the key things that she did was focused on teaching and then coaching. Teaching initially how to make this shift in terms of prioritization in her team. Her team had to learn the tools in order to do the analysis of how important is this and learn the phraseology to say, hey, I think this is something we need to pause on here and here's why. And then it was about coaching that until it was instilled. And that did take a good 4 months to really get the team empowered to make these better decisions and focus on that high impact activity. Initially, they thought they knew the theory, but actually embedding it and changing how they operated so they interacted with the rest of the organization differently took a good 4 months, right? So although we had an almost instantaneous impact, Emily was in this for four to 5 months, a good month for us to diagnose and work through the initial implementation. And immediately we saw results. But for the long-term change, it does take time because she had to realign her team. But here's the upside. Her team's no longer just busy. They are productive in many ways. She's doubled her team size and now a VP of engineering. She feels fulfilled. Even though she's got way more responsibilities now, she's less stressed. She's making a real difference. And she's got a promotion while working fewer hours. So I'm hoping you're seeing with this story how tempting it is to be in reactive mode, but what truly matters and how to make that lasting impact in an organization. Prioritization, communication, celebrating. True success comes from the right work and impact, not just presenteeism. So I want you to take this and start implementing this today. I want you to start on meaningful work. I want you to start figuring out which outcomes are going to be more sustainable for the organization. So look at how you're prioritizing high impact tasks. Do you have time every single week for prioritization? Do you have clear, achievable goals? Do you and your team know how to say no? Do you know how to push back? Do you coach your team on how to push back? I love giving people stock phrases for saying, hey, I need some time to assess that, right? Does your team know how to demonstrate to those around them the impact that they're making? If not, why not? Do you know how to demonstrate to your boss the power of you not being available for a short period of time? Half a day, you're not in email, you're not on Slack. The phone's available, but only for emergencies. Does your team know how to escalate in an emergency if this is genuinely needed? So something I'm very passionate about doing is having blocks of time where you're not available, but people can escalate if there's a real emergency, which generally speaking shouldn't happen unless you're working in an environment where that is your job, right? So it should be that you don't have to be available for several hours. And as long as your team knows you will be online at 2 p.m. to answer emails and in Slack at that time, then don't expect anything from me. But should something bad happen, here's my phone number. And then coach them through what an emergency genuinely is. Because very few things need you within a couple of hours, right? Most things can wait until later on in the day. Be reliable though. If you're going to have those time blocks, you then have to be reliable and be online when you said you're going to be online. They should expect silence and then expect response so that they can be trusted you and what they expect from you. You need to be reliable. So I want you to take the time, prioritize, embrace saying no, celebrate more, coach your team on time blocking, having similar work tasks in one block, and making sure that those blocks include the strategic goals. Have time every day to deal with communications, but in blocks rather than all the way through the day. And create an environment where you celebrate the work that really matters. Ask everyone at the beginning of every meeting what they've done on their strategic priorities. Simply asking that sets the expectation of this is more important than the other stuff I've asked you about. Ask it first. Make sure it's acknowledged. And even if they're stuck, celebrate it, right? Celebrate the tricky stuff. Celebrate getting stuck. Celebrate having a conversation about the hard things. And try and identify when people are procrastinating, which is when we tend to fall back into reactive work. We're procrastinating because something's hard. And then the guilt cycle means we work longer hours, but with more exhaustion. So we actually struggle to get into that hard strategic stuff even more because it was already hard. We've procrastinated. We're now tired. There's a deadline. We're less creative and we're less innovative. People should be ready and willing to say, I'm stuck on this. Let's have a conversation. And celebrate unsticking. Encourage this culture of discussion, recognition, appreciation for quality, not presenteeism. Ask yourself, what do you personally need to celebrate the hard stuff in your life? Figure you out first and your team will come along with you. Okay, I hope this conversation has been powerful for you. This is so incredibly important. I'm a huge, huge believer in quality first, not quantity. And I would love to hear how you're getting on. If you're feeling stuck on this, drop me a DM in LinkedIn. I respond to all of them. And if you need to, book a call with me and my team. We'll be happy to give you some top tips, tailored advice just for you. Head over to the show notes if you'd like the link to join the conversation over in Slack or send me a DM. Until next time, remember, stay in your tech leadership game, follow your dreams because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.